I woke up bald on the very day of my son's wedding. A shock that struck the very core of my soul, but ironically, it became the beginning of an unexpected liberation, a cleansing that forced me to question and redefine my entire life up until that moment. My daughter-in-law, Lauren, had left her calling card, a slip of paper carrying pure, limitless cruelty. Now you look the part, you ridiculous old hag. Fate, always twisted, arranged for this to happen on the very day I was planning to transfer an inheritance of $22 million to her and Michael, my only son. The true sting of irony, however, pierced my heart only a few hours later. During the champagne toast, I had planned to declare how happy I was to welcome her into the family, how excited I was about the future that, in my naive hope, I had imagined for them. But the truth behind all of it would soon unfold into a story life itself insisted on rewriting. Let me begin from the start so you can understand just how far the shadows of betrayal can reach and how a woman pushed to the edge of despair found the strength to be reborn. It was Michael's wedding day, my only son, a day that should have been the happiest of my life as a mother, the pinnacle of all effort and sacrifice, but instead began with an ominous emptiness, a chilling premonition tightening around my heart. My hand instinctively reached to my head. Nothing, just cold, bare skin. My heart pounded, ready to burst from my chest like a war drum as I rushed to the bathroom mirror. What I saw left me frozen. My hair, my carefully tended silver hair that had been with me through 65 years of triumphs and struggles, was gone without a trace. Someone had shaved it all off while I slept, with a precision and cruelty that stole my breath. Tears poured uncontrollably, hot and salty. But what I felt wasn't just the shock of a ruined appearance. It was the deep humiliation of realizing that someone close to me could betray me in such a way. Today was Michael's wedding to Lauren, a woman who, from the very first day, had treated me as an obstacle, as an outdated relic in the perfect new life she intended to build with my son. She never liked me. I knew that. But I still held on to the hope that time and my son's wedding might soften her. On my nightstand was a folded note that hadn't been there the evening before, white and seemingly harmless, yet it radiated a coldness that chilled me. My trembling fingers could barely feel the thinness of the paper as I opened it. The words burned into my memory like hot iron, a venomous message aimed straight at my heart. Now you look the part, you ridiculous old hag. Have a nice day at Lauren's wedding. The last line was decorated with a childish bow, making the malice even sharper. The paper slipped from my fingers like a withered leaf and floated to the bedroom carpet. I sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling utterly hollow, like an empty seashell tossed by the waves. That morning, I had not only lost my hair, I had lost the last shred of dignity that remained in this house. Once my sanctuary, my fortress, my home. I remembered every time Lauren, with her fake smile that never reached her eyes, mocked my appearance, criticized my clothes, my hair, always pointing to my age. Donna, don't you think that color makes you look older? Maybe you should consider a more modern, fresh, youthful look? And Michael, my beloved son, would just nod along like a lifeless puppet beside her, unwilling or unable to recognize the quiet cruelty in her words, never stepping in to defend me. This was the same Michael I had raised alone after his father Richard passed away when he was just 12. I had worked day and night, setting aside my own dreams and ambitions to build the financial empire he now enjoyed, never once questioning where it came from, as if the wealth had simply fallen from the sky. I stood up and walked to the closet, my movements mechanical, but inside, a storm was gathering. I had to decide. I could lock myself away, feign illness to avoid the public humiliation, hide in sorrow like a wounded animal. But that would be exactly what Lauren wanted. She wanted me erased, wanted me to retreat into pain, to surrender the battlefield without a fight. A flicker of defiance sparked inside me, like a small flame in the darkness. As I searched among the neatly folded fabrics, my mind drifted back 3 years to the day Michael first introduced Lauren to me. It was at an upscale restaurant in New York, walls gilded and tables draped in fine linen, a place meant for joy and memory. She arrived late, without apology, without remorse, and spent the entire evening talking only about herself, her career plans, her lavish travels, her grand philosophies of life. Not a single question for me, not a single gesture of regard for the woman who had given birth to the man she claimed to love. Her eyes sparkled when she spoke of her accomplishments, but turned cold and calculating when they looked at me. When we sat down after dinner, I said to Michael, "Son, this woman cannot be trusted. She's calculating, cold, like a predator lying in wait." My son answered with a chill I had never seen in him before, a coldness that pierced straight through my heart like shattered ice. "Mom, Lauren is the woman of my life. If you can't accept that, then maybe we should keep our distance." Distance. That word became a bitter reality for the next 3 years. Michael visited me less. Our calls grew shorter and more infrequent. He only called when he needed something, a new investment, a financial hurdle I had to solve. Family dinners turned into tense battlefields, filled with Lauren's sharp, mocking remarks and Michael's uncomfortable silence, a silence heavier than any accusation. But today was different. Today was the day of an important decision I had wrestled with for weeks. A decision born from a mother's deep worry mixed with a hint of desperation. Today, after the wedding, I intended to transfer $22 million into Michael and Lauren's joint account. It was a wedding gift, the final gesture to ensure my son would never face hardship as I had endured my whole life. It was my last hope to win back his love and closeness. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The bald woman staring back at me was no longer the strong Donna who had built an empire from nothing. She was just a humiliated, broken woman, reduced to a cruel joke by someone who had never worked a single day in her life, whose hands had touched nothing but bottles of nail polish. I had become her punchline, the symbol of her power over me. I picked up the phone and dialed my hairdresser. "Mrs. Louise, I need you immediately," I said firmly, masking the turmoil in my heart. "Bring the best wig you have. And please, be discreet." If Lauren thought this would destroy me, she was wrong. The seed of resistance had been planted and was beginning to grow. While waiting for Mrs. Louise, I sat in the living room and let the memories flood in, a wave of grief and sacrifice. It's strange how the mind often chooses the heaviest losses to remind us of what's gone and of what must never be lost again. I remembered the day Richard, my husband, my anchor, died. Michael was only 12, and I was 32, a young widow, exhausted and desperate. The doctor said it was a sudden heart attack, but standing in that cold hospital hallway, all I could think was, how am I going to raise my son alone? How will we survive? How will either of us survive? Richard had been the financial brain of our small real estate business. I didn't even know how to write a check properly. My world was turned completely upside down. But that night, after the funeral, when Michael fell asleep in my arms, his little hand clutching my and dress, I made a decision that changed both our lives. I would never let my son feel financial insecurity. He would never grow up in fear, the way I had. The early years were brutal, a constant fight for survival. I worked from 5 a.m. until 11 p.m. I devoured every book on investing, plunged into real estate, studied business law, learned the ruthless rules of that world. I made mistakes that cost me thousands of dollars, but each one taught me an invaluable lesson. Slowly, I became the tough businesswoman I am today. Michael never knew about the nights I stayed up calculating whether I could afford his textbooks or sports uniforms, the days I skipped meals so he would have enough to eat. By the time he was 18, our company had become one of the largest businesses in the state, a thriving empire I had built with my own hands. By the time he graduated college, we were millionaires. But Michael never asked how it all came to be. To him, money simply existed, as if he had been born entitled to it. "I need money for a down payment on an apartment," he said at 25, his tone casual, demanding. "Mom, Lauren and I want to travel across Europe. And of course, it has to be luxurious," he announced at 30, without a shred of gratitude. Never requests, always commands. As if my money was naturally his, as if I had no needs or dreams of my own. And I always gave, because I thought that was a mother's duty, to guarantee her child's happiness. I worked myself to exhaustion so he could live in comfort, to the point that I forgot to teach him the value of labor, of effort, of sacrifice. I had lost that lesson, and now I was paying the price, with his bitter ingratitude and lack of respect. Lauren's arrival only made things worse, like pouring gasoline on a fire. From day one, she acted like the mistress of the house, while I became nothing more than an unwelcome guest in my own family, in my own home. "Donna, don't you think Michael and I need a little more privacy?" she asked me once at dinner, her voice sweet as honey, but her eyes cold as ice. "Maybe it would be better if you moved somewhere smaller, more suitable for a woman your age, perhaps a little apartment in the suburbs." Michael said nothing. He just sat there, cutting his meat, as if he hadn't heard his fiancée suggest that I should leave the very house I had bought and paid for, brick by brick, drop by drop of sweat. But what hurt me more wasn't her direct words. It was the way she quietly erased me from their lives. Family dinners where they spoke only to each other, as if I didn't exist, as if I were a ghost in my own home. Conversations stopped abruptly when I entered a room, and the glances they exchanged when I spoke made me feel like a senile old woman who couldn't possibly understand how the modern world worked. 6 months ago, at Christmas dinner, Lauren told me, "Donna, Michael and I have been talking about the future. We believe it would be best for everyone if you played a less active role in family decisions. Your time has passed." Michael nodded without lifting his eyes from his plate. His silent agreement was like a knife twisting in my chest. That night, I stayed awake until 4 a.m., crying quietly. My tears were saltier and more bitter than anything I had ever tasted, hidden so they wouldn't hear me. It wasn't just rejection that destroyed me, but the ingratitude, the feeling that I had raised a stranger, someone who knew nothing of the sacrifices I had made for him, of the love I had poured into him. Yet he was still my son. And a month ago, when Michael told me he wanted to marry Lauren, I decided to make the grandest gesture of my life. I contacted our longtime family lawyer, Mr. Richard Daniels, a man who had stood by me for decades and prepared to transfer $22 million. It was nearly my entire net worth, a wedding gift for them, the final bridge, desperate and trembling, that I built toward their hearts. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Donna?" Richard asked me, his voice heavy with worry, his eyes searching mine. "This is an enormous sum, one you deserve for your old age, after all your hard work." I told him I was sure. I thought this last generous act might remind Michael who his mother really was, and show Lauren that I wasn't the enemy, but someone who only wanted their happiness. I was wrong. The sound of the doorbell pulled me out of my memories, out of the storm of the past. It was my hairdresser, Mrs. Louise, carrying a large box, her face filled with concern. "Dear Donna, what happened?" she asked with genuine worry when she saw my bald head, her eyes wide with shock. "Just a small accident," I lied with a smile that still felt foreign on my lips, like an ill-fitting mask. "I need you to help me look presentable for my son's wedding. An emergency solution, so to speak." As she carefully fitted the wig onto my head, a thick, silvery gray wig that looked just like my real hair, restoring a shred of my dignity, I looked in the mirror and made an unshakable decision. I would go to that wedding. I would smile. I would bless the bride and groom. I would give a toast. But that morning had changed me. They didn't know that when they decided to humiliate me, they had ignited a spark inside me. A spark that had quickly become a blazing fire of determination, an unstoppable force. I arrived at St. Mary's Church in Boston an hour early. The place was decorated with white and gold flowers, a sea of lilies and roses filling the air with sweetness. Everything was luxurious, expensive, perfect, exactly as Lauren had always dreamed. A fairy tale built on my dime. My wig was flawless. My navy silk dress fit elegantly. On the outside, I looked like the proud mother everyone expected, steady and joyful. But inside, I felt a crushing weight pressing against my chest. The weight of betrayal and disillusionment. I sat in a pew near the back, watching as the staff finished the final touches, lighting candles, arranging bouquets. Suddenly, I heard familiar voices coming from a side hallway. The voice was low and hushed, but I recognized it instantly. Michael, speaking on the phone. His tone was tense, anxious, almost pleading. "No, you can't come now," he whispered. "The ceremony is in an hour. We'll talk after the honeymoon. I promise." Something in his voice, an urgent strangeness, made me rise and move quietly toward the sound. He was standing behind a large column, back turned so I couldn't see his face. "I know it's hard to keep this secret, but as soon as we have Mom's money, everything will be different. We can be together without hiding, start a new life." It felt like someone had punched me in the stomach, a cold, breath-stealing blow. What money was he talking about? And who did he want to be with, openly? A horrifying suspicion began to form in my mind, icy and merciless. "Listen, Valerie," Michael continued, and my world shattered into 1,000 pieces. Valerie. I knew that name. She was his secretary, a 25-year-old girl who worked in his office, someone my son was secretly involved with while preparing to marry Lauren, living a double life I never could have imagined. After today, everything will change. My mom will transfer $22 million. With that money, we can go anywhere, do anything. A life of freedom, of luxury. I moved closer. My heart pounded so hard I feared he could hear it. Each beat was a stab of pain. "I just need a few more weeks of your patience, and then we'll be free." "Lauren doesn't suspect a thing," Michael continued, his voice dripping with smugness. "She's too obsessed with this perfect wedding, with her dream of being the wife of a wealthy man, to notice anything else. And my mom? She's so desperate, she'll do anything to make me happy." Those words pierced me like knives, each sentence another stab into a heart already scarred. "No, I don't feel guilty," Michael said, clearly answering something Valerie had asked. "Lauren knows exactly what she's doing being with me. This is a marriage of convenience for both of us, a mutual con. And Mom? She's had a good life. It's time she enjoys old age without worrying about business. Old age, as if I were some employee who had finished my shift and could now be tossed aside with a small retirement check, discarded like an old object." The conversation went on, each word worse than the last, a spiraling vortex of betrayal. Michael had planned everything. The marriage to Lauren was fake, a sophisticated trap to get my money. The relationship with Valerie was real but secret, until he had secured enough to divorce and start a new life, a life without me. After the transfer, we'll wait a few months, Michael explained, with a coldness I didn't recognize in my son, a coldness that froze my blood. We'll tell Mom that Lauren and I need our own space, that we want to live separately. Eventually, I'll convince her to move into a nursing home. She's 65. That's completely normal, a natural step in life. A nursing home. They wanted to erase me entirely, lock me away somewhere. I would no longer be a threat to their plan. Hearing footsteps approach, I quickly stepped back, pretending to examine the flowers on the altar. My hands trembled. Michael appeared moments later, smiling, looking every bit the nervous but happy groom. His eyes lit up with a false joy. "Mom," he said, kissing my cheek, "you look beautiful. That color really suits you." I looked into his eyes that once belonged to my innocent boy, once filled with love and admiration. But now, all I saw was a stranger, someone who had meticulously planned to use me and then discard me like an old piece of furniture. "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied, with the most false smile of my life. "An award-worthy performance. I'm very happy for your special day." Michael hugged me, and for a moment, I wanted to confront him, to ask when he had become this person. But something held me back. Maybe it was my survival instinct rising, or maybe it was the first time I saw everything with absolute clarity, a sharpness that changed everything. "Where's Lauren?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm, though it trembled slightly in the bridal suite filled with bridesmaids. Michael answered, "She's a little stressed. You know, brides, perfectionists and all that." Stressed. If she knew what I had just discovered, she'd be more than stressed. She'd be shattered. "I think I should go congratulate her," I said. Michael nodded absent-mindedly before turning to speak with the priest about finalizing the last details of their charade. I walked toward the bridal room, my legs shaky, each step a struggle, but an invisible force pushed me forward. I didn't know exactly what I would face, but I needed to see Lauren. I needed to know if she was aware of Valerie, or if she too was just another victim in this web of deceit. The door was slightly ajar. I heard laughter and chatter, the clinking of champagne glasses ringing out like a mocking melody. I stepped closer and heard Lauren's voice, sharp, brash, triumphant. "Ladies, in just a few months I'll be officially rich. Michael has no idea I've already contacted a divorce lawyer. By law, I'm entitled to half of everything we get today, half of 22 million. Just imagine." Lauren had a plan too. She was using Michael. She wasn't an innocent victim. She was a partner in betrayal. "And the old hag?" one of her friends asked, her voice dripping with contempt. "Donna will be easy to deal with," Lauren sneered. "I already have her under my control. Once the money is transferred, I'll convince Michael to put her away somewhere. This old hag has lived too long and thinks she owns everything. Her role is over." The laughter that followed hit me like the cackling of hyenas over a carcass cold and merciless. I backed away from the door, feeling as if I were trapped in a Kafkaesque nightmare. A play with no exit. My son was betraying me with his secretary. My daughter-in-law was using me to get rich and then divorce him. And me, an old fool of 65, was about to hand over millions of dollars on a silver platter. The work of a lifetime. Every sacrifice I had ever made, all laid at the altar of their greed. But now I knew everything. every vile detail of their scheme, and they had no idea I knew. I sat in my car in the church parking lot, my hands trembling as I held the phone. My whole world had collapsed in just a few minutes, and yet strangely, for the first time in years, I felt completely clear-headed, as if the fog had lifted, as if the shock had freed me from a deep stupor, pulling me out of a long sleep. I dialed my lawyer, Richard Daniels, who had been my trusted legal partner for 20 years. He answered after the second ring. "Donna, how are you? Is everything ready for the big transfer this afternoon? I've prepared the paperwork." "Richard, I need to cancel the transfer immediately," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even as a storm raged inside me. There was a long, heavy silence. "Are you sure? The files are all ready. The only thing missing is your final approval after the ceremony. This is a massive sum, completely secured. I need you to come to my house tomorrow morning. We need to make some important changes to my will." "Of course, Donna. Has something happened? You sound very different." "Let's just say I've had a revelation, an awakening about my two Donna. Family, one that has opened my eyes completely." I hung up and sat in silence, watching the guests file into the church. Elegant families, faces glowing with joy. Friends of Michael and Lauren, none the wiser. People I had known for years, many of whom I had helped in business. They had all come to celebrate what they believed was a marriage of love, not knowing they were about to witness the most elaborate con of their lives, a play for which I now held the script. But I knew the truth, and now I had to decide what to do with it. I could confront Michael directly, tell him I had overheard everything, expose him in front of everyone. I could speak to Lauren, tear apart her divorce plan, show her she wasn't as clever as she thought. I could even cancel the wedding entirely, humiliate them both before the crowd. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized none of those options would give me the satisfaction I needed. They had spent months, maybe years, plotting to exploit me and then discard me. They deserved something more creative, a strike they would never forget, a lesson that would haunt their nights forever. I walked back into the church just as the ceremony began. Walking down the aisle toward the front pew, my posture straight, my gaze steady, I smiled at everyone as if I were the happiest mother alive. A flawless illusion. Michael saw me and forced a smile, his eyes flicking quickly to Lauren and back to me, as if checking his performance. Lauren, radiant in her French lace gown worth $10,000, gave me a slight nod, her lips curved in a triumphant smile. The two of them looked perfect, convincing in their roles as a pair of adoring lovers, a performance they had staged with painstaking care. Throughout the ceremony, as the pastor spoke of love, trust, and fidelity in marriage, words that now sounded like cruel mockery, I silently calculated my next move, mapping each step in my mind. I listened to the vows Michael and Lauren exchanged. Promises I knew for certain neither of them intended to keep. And a strange calm settled over me, a chilling serenity, like the silence before a storm. I knew that I now held the power, that this game would be played by my rules. If anyone here knows a reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now. The pastor intoned solemnly, his voice echoing in the hushed space. For a moment, I almost stood. My mouth parted, my muscles tensed. I pictured the horrified faces, the chaos erupting, the instant humiliation of both of them in front of the crowd. But then, I stayed silent. I had devised a better plan, a plan that would leave a scar far deeper than any fleeting public shame. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, I clapped with everyone else, my applause blending seamlessly into their perfect illusion. My smile shone even brighter than most guests. When Michael kissed Lauren, I beamed like the proud mother everyone expected to see. But my eyes held only false joy. and as the newlyweds walked down the aisle, radiant and oblivious, I rose and followed them out of the church. My steps were steady, my back straight, and inside me surged a powerful sense of control. At the wedding reception, I carried myself like the perfect hostess. I greeted each guest with a warm smile and a sincere handshake. My voice was gentle, friendly. I complimented Lauren on her beauty, praised Michael for looking so happy, every word a deliberate lie. I danced with my son when he asked, leaning in to whisper how proud I was of him. "Mom, having you here really means so much to me," Michael said as we swayed, his hand resting lightly at my waist. "I know things have been tense lately, but I want you to know I love you. I truly appreciate you." I looked into his eyes, the same eyes that, just hours earlier, had lied so casually over the phone, cold and calculating. "I love you too, sweetheart. I will always love you, no matter what happens." He smiled, likely thinking I was referring to my acceptance of Lauren, of their union. He had no idea I was speaking of what I was about to do, the truth I was preparing to unveil. The moment was drawing near, and inside me the tension rose, a fiery, almost sweet anticipation for the act of revenge. When it came time for the toast, Michael approached me with a glass of champagne, a bright smile on his face, blind to the disaster about to erupt. "Mom, would you like to say a few words? It would mean the world to me if you gave the toast." "Of course, sweetheart. It would be an honor," I replied, my voice soft, almost fragile. Michael called for everyone's attention, and the murmurs in the hall quieted as all eyes turned toward me, waiting. Lauren smiled at me from the head table, the practiced smile she had perfected over 3 years, like a second mask. Michael held my hand, playing the role of the devoted son, honoring his mother. "Thank you all for being here on this special day," I began, my voice clear and strong, carrying across the room effortlessly. As Michael's mother, I can hardly put into words how deeply moved I am to see my son marry the woman he loves. There was applause, polite murmurs of approval. A few guests looked at me with warmth. Lauren blushed gracefully, her cheeks touched with a soft pink. Michael squeezed my hand with affection, a gesture that made me nearly sick. 33 years ago, when Michael was born, I promised I would always protect him, put his happiness above all else. And through the years, I have never broken that promise, not once. Applause again, louder this time. The room was captivated, no one realizing the tragedy about to unfold. Today, as a special wedding gift, I had planned to transfer $22 million into their joint account, the entirety of my net worth, the result of my life's work. A wave of astonishment rippled across the room. Gasps of disbelief rose from several corners. Michael froze at my side. His hand gripping mine suddenly turned cold and rigid. Lauren sat upright, her eyes blazing with greed she could no longer conceal, glowing like twin flames of hunger. But I continued, and the hall sank into a suffocating silence. "But I've decided instead to give an even greater gift." Michael stared at me, his brows furrowed in confusion. Lauren's expression flickered, her perfect mask cracking for the first time, fear glinting in her eyes. "The most precious gift I can give you both." I paused, letting the weight of my words build. "Is the truth." The silence was so deep I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Every gaze locked onto me, waiting. Michael dropped my hand, his shock quickly spiraling into panic, his eyes wide with terror. Lauren sat frozen, but I noticed her knuckles turn white around the stem of her champagne glass. "The truth," I said slowly, each word like a verdict. "It is a powerful thing." And today, I uncovered truths that change everything I ever believed about my family, about the people I loved most. I took a sip of champagne, my eyes sweeping the room, letting the tension swell until it was about to burst. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, whispering nervously. Even the photographer stopped, his camera dangling as he stared at me in anticipation. You see, I continued with a calm smile, my gaze shifting between Michael and Lauren. This morning, I woke up to find my hair gone. Someone had shaved it all off while I slept, leaving behind a little note. I reached into my purse, pulling out the folded paper and opening it slowly, deliberately, so those nearby could read the cruel words. The note said, "Now you have a look that suits you, you ridiculous old hag. Have a lovely day at the wedding." Gasps spread through the hall, followed by heavy silence. Several eyes turned toward Lauren, whose face had gone pale, her lips pressed tightly together. Michael stood motionless, his fists clenched. "Mom," he began, his voice catching. I raised my hand to stop him. "I'm not finished yet, my dear son." My voice was still calm, almost tender, a strange gentleness, so at odds with the truth I was about to expose. Because that cruel act led me to even more fascinating discoveries. Truths that revealed the real nature of certain people here, laying bare their souls. I circled the head table, each step slow and deliberate, like a lawyer presenting evidence before a jury. Every pair of eyes followed me. For example, I discovered that my son, Michael, for the past 6 months, has been secretly involved with his secretary, Valerie Wright, while preparing to marry Lauren. The hall erupted in gasps and whispers, a shockwave tearing through the crowd. Michael shot to his feet, knocking his wine glass to the floor where it shattered. "Mom, stop this. This isn't true." "Why should I stop, Michael? Didn't you promise Valerie that after you got my money, the two of you could be together openly? Didn't you promise to divorce Lauren and start a new life, a new family, a new happiness, all built on your mother's sacrifice?" Lauren leapt up too, her face twisting into a mask of rage and humiliation, though panic flickered beneath. Her eyes darted wildly. "This is ridiculous. Donna is making things up because she can't accept that Michael doesn't need her anymore. She's just a jealous, bitter old woman." "Ah, dear Lauren." I turned toward her, my smile icy, my eyes boring straight into hers. "But you have your own secrets, don't you? Secrets you've hidden away until this morning, when I uncovered them." Lauren froze. I saw the fear in her eyes. She swallowed hard, her face draining to the color of ash. "Why don't you tell everyone about your conversation with the divorce lawyer? About how you planned to take half of the $22 million I was supposed to transfer today? Tell them how you were going to leave Michael the moment that money was in your hands, dropping him like a hot potato." Lauren's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her face shifted from pale to flushed red, then darkened like overripe fruit. "Well, don't be shy." I smiled encouragingly, my voice sweet, but each word a lash of the whip. "Tell them how you planned to convince Michael to stick me in a nursing home as soon as you had the money secured. An old woman who's lived too long, who thought she owned everything, now disposable like some worn-out trinket." The laughter that rang in my ears then wasn't hyenas circling a carcass. It was half-frightened, half-shocked laughter from the guests, reveling in the chaos unfolding before their eyes. I stepped back, letting the bomb I had dropped detonate fully. The room fell into absolute silence. A few guests gaped, others raised their phones to record, their eyes wide in disbelief. Lauren's parents stood and moved toward their daughter, horror and shame etched across their faces. At last, Michael found his voice, trembling. "Mom, I don't know where you got all this from. But from your own mouth, Michael." I cut him off, my voice sharp as a blade. "I heard it all. I heard you this morning, talking to Valerie every word, every detail about how you planned to use my money to start a new life with her. The entire scheme you plotted for months behind my back. Michael collapsed back into his chair like a puppet with its strings cut. His face drained of color. A ghost. A hollow shell. And what about you? I turned to Lauren, my voice like ice. I heard you myself, in the bridal suite, bragging to your friends about divorcing Michael as soon as you had my money. About how you planned to get rid of me, the foolish old hag, by shoving me into a nursing home. Finally, Lauren screamed, her face crimson, her eyes blazing. It's all lies. This crazy old. The woman is making everything up because she's jealous that Michael doesn't need her anymore. She's delusional. Jealous? I repeated, my voice rising for the first time, full of righteous fury. Jealous of what? Jealous that I gave birth to a son who would rob his own mother? Jealous that I was stupid enough to believe his love for me was real? Jealous that I laid my dignity at the feet of a pair of ungrateful parasites? I turned toward the guests, raising my hand slightly, as if to command their full attention. For 33 years, since the day I became a widow, I have worked day and night, sacrificing my health, my youth, my dreams, to build an empire not for myself, but for my son. I gave up love, opportunities, personal happiness, just so he would never taste poverty, so he could have a life of comfort. Tears welled up, but they were no longer tears of grief. They were tears of release, of cleansing, washing my face clean. And today, I discovered that in his eyes, I am nothing more than an obstacle, an old hag, to be shaved bald, humiliated, and finally tossed into a nursing home like garbage. Michael leapt to his feet, tears streaming down his face, desperate. Mom, please let me explain. It's not what you think. Explain what, Michael? Explain marrying a woman you already planned to leave? Explain plotting to force me out of the house I bought with my own hands? Or explain planning to throw away the mother who gave you everything, my soul, my entire life? Lauren's father stepped forward, placing a trembling hand on his daughter's shoulder, his voice unsteady. Is it true, what she's saying? His shame was plain, his eyes filled with disappointment. Lauren looked at her father, then at Michael, and finally at me. For the first time in the 3 years I had known her, she had no answer, no clever excuse, no lie ready on her lips. This is just a misunderstanding. Small and pitiful. I replied firmly. This is the truth. And the truth is, you both deserve exactly what you're about to get. Nothing. I walked toward the door, my hand on the handle. Then I stopped, turned back to the couple frozen in the chaos of the crowd. Oh, and about the 22 million, I said coldly. I canceled the transfer this morning. Consider that the real wedding gift, the chance to build a life without the money of the foolish old woman. The last sounds I heard as I left the hall were Lauren's hysterical screams and Michael's desperate pleas, swallowed by the storm of chaos, drowning the room. I walked steadily to my car, my soul lighter than it had been in years, as if I had set down a crushing weight. I drew in a breath of fresh air, the first I'd truly felt in decades, and my lungs filled with life. Behind me, the noise of disorder still echoed shouts, scraping chairs, breaking glass. But I no longer belonged to that play. I had spoken the truth, and the release was fierce. A freedom I had never dared to dream of. As I drove home, my phone rang endlessly. Michael, Lauren, then unfamiliar numbers, likely guests hungry for more details. Their thirst for drama was insatiable. I turned the phone off and drove in silence. A deep peace spread through me, a serenity I had long forgotten. By the time I reached home, for the first time in years, it truly belonged to me. No more tension, no more subtle contempt, No more tiptoeing just to avoid Lauren's wrath. I no longer had to pretend everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I sat in my favorite armchair in the living room, looking out at the garden, bathed in sunset, and removed the wig. My bald head was no longer a symbol of humiliation, but of freedom, rebirth, and strength. Lauren had wanted to shame me, but without knowing it, she gave me the final push I needed to see the truth and take back control of my life. That night, I slept better than I had in years, a deep, peaceful sleep, free of nightmares and fear. The next morning, lawyer Richard Davis arrived early as promised, his briefcase in hand, his eyes full of concern and curiosity as he studied me. "Donna, I saw some of the videos from yesterday spreading on social media," he said, lowering his voice. "I'm fine, Richard. Better than ever," I answered honestly. My smile, this time, was real. "Did you bring the papers I asked for?" "Yes, but are you sure about these changes?" "They're drastic. Your entire estate will be left to charity. I have to warn you, Michael may contest this." I assured him I was absolutely certain. The new will was clear. Everything would go to 3 charities that supported widows starting businesses, giving them independence and a fresh start. Michael would receive nothing. His inheritance was his betrayal. "What if Michael sues to contest it?" Richard asked, his voice tinged with worry. "Let him try," I said with a calm smile, free of bitterness. I recorded all his scheming, every word proving he only wanted to use me. Any judge will understand why I made this decision. He gave me all the evidence I needed to make sure this story is remembered forever as a reminder of his betrayal. In the weeks that followed, Michael tried to reach me over and over. At first with desperate pleas, then threats of lawsuits, and finally emotional blackmail. He never understood that everything he once had from me was gone, that his greed had stolen it all. Lauren came to me too, knocking at my door in tears, begging for forgiveness. Her face was smeared with makeup and despair. "Donna, please." It was all a misunderstanding. "Michael and I want to start over. We want a real relationship with you, to be a family." I looked at her through the half-open door, never opening it wider. "A real relationship? Do you mean one where I'm respected as a human being, not treated like an ATM for... I want you to drain at will?" "Yes, that's right," she choked out, tears streaming down her face. "We've learned our lesson. Please give us a second chance." "I'm glad you've learned something," I said gently but firmly. "But teaching you is no longer my responsibility. Your adults face the consequences yourselves." I closed the door, and I never opened it again. 2 months later, I heard from acquaintances that Michael and Lauren had divorced. Their plan collapsed quickly once they realized there would be no fortune. The only foundation they had in common disappeared. Michael tried to continue with Valerie, but she left as soon as she discovered he no longer had a dime to his name. The scheme had completely failed. Lauren moved back in with her parents, forced for the first time in years to find a job to support herself. Michael had to sell his luxury car and move into a small apartment. Their once lavish lifestyle was in ruins. I could say I felt satisfaction hearing the news, but the truth is, I felt nothing. They were no longer part of my emotional life. Their tragedies were no longer my tragedies. I focused on building a new life. A life I had never dared to imagine during decades of sacrifice. A life of freedom and self-determination. At 65, I decided to do everything I had once put aside. I enrolled in art classes, reviving the childhood passion, buried under the weight of responsibility. I discovered I had a gift for landscapes, as if the flame had only been sleeping, waiting to ignite. My teacher, Carmen, also a widowed woman, became a kindred spirit. We understood each other without needing many words. It's miraculous to bloom again, to finally put ourselves first, Carmen said as we painted together in the park, the sun lighting her face. I felt reborn in every breath. I also began to travel Italy, France, Japan, places I had once longed for, but always deemed too extravagant while burdened with family duties. Now the world opened before me, full of beauty and diversity, an endless source of inspiration. On a trip to Tuscany, I met Robert, a 70-year-old Italian widower who had lost his wife 2 years earlier. His eyes still carried sorrow. It wasn't lightning strike passion, but a deep connection, a mutual recognition. Two people, who had spent their lives caring for others, were now learning to care for themselves, to honor their own needs. We shared stories, laughed at life's ironies, and found comfort in gentle companionship. My late wife once said that when the children grow up, we must relearn who we are without them, Robert said one evening as we walked through vineyards heavy with ripe grapes, the sunset painting everything gold. But I think she was wrong. It's not about going back to who we once were, but about discovering who we can become the best version of ourselves. Robert was right. I wasn't reclaiming the old Donna. I had created a new version of myself, stronger, wiser, freer, ready to savor life to its fullest. A year after the wedding disaster, I decided to sell the family home. It was too big for me alone, burdened with memories that no longer served me. Ghosts of the past I didn't want to carry forward. They clung to the walls like a stale scent. I bought a smaller house near the ocean, in a quiet bay, with a perfect studio for painting and a garden I could tend with my own hands. A place of peace and inspiration, my own private paradise. On the day I signed the sale papers, Michael showed up one last time. "Mom," he said as I opened the door, his voice weak, desperate. "Do you really want to sell the house I grew up in? All the memories, everything that connects us?" I looked at him for a long moment. He had grown thin, with dark circles under his eyes, looking far older than 33. Life had etched its marks on his face, but what struck me most was that his eyes no longer held the cold calculation I'd have in Ney, seen on his wedding day. He looked lost, fragile, like a child who had lost his way. "Yes," I answered, my voice free of resentment, only carrying a gentle but unwavering firmness. "It's time for both of us to move on." "I was wrong, Mom. A terrible mistake. I regret it so much." For the first time since the wedding, I felt a flicker of maternal sorrow. But I was no longer the woman who would sacrifice everything to shield her son from pain. I had learned my lesson, and now he had to learn his the hard way. "Michael," I said, softly but firmly, my words like a gentle push that could not be resisted. "You made choices that shattered something between us. I've learned to live with those consequences. Now it's your turn. You must take responsibility for your life, for your own mistakes." "But you're my mother," he whispered, his voice breaking, tears streaming down his face. "I've been your mother for 33 years, I replied. "I've given you everything I could. Now it's time for you to live your own life, to find your path without leaning on my sacrifices or my money." Closing that door, the door to the past, was not easy, but it was necessary. An act born of love, but love with boundaries, so that we both could finally heal. Today, 2 years later, I am living a life I never dared to dream of during decades of sacrifice. A life full of joy and fulfillment. My paintings are displayed in many local galleries and have found eager buyers. Art has become both my passion and my source of income. Robert and I maintain a relationship that is distant yet fitting. We visit each other, travel together, laugh together, learn together, and cherish every moment, while still keeping our independence and personal space. Our bond is strong and free. My mornings begin with a fragrant cup of coffee on the balcony facing the sea, the sound of waves as my background, not the urgent family crisis calls that used to weigh me down. My afternoons are spent painting or reading, immersing myself in new worlds instead of solving financial problems for grown adults who should have been responsible for themselves. The most important thing is that every morning when I look in the mirror, I see a woman who finally belongs to herself. My hair has grown back, whiter than before, marked by time and wisdom, but I wear it proudly. It is a symbol of rebirth, of triumph over betrayal and disappointment. Sometimes I wonder if Michael ever realizes what he has lost, but that no longer concerns me. I've learned that motherhood does not mean allowing yourself to be exploited. It means loving enough to set boundaries, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because true love teaches independence, not dependence. I am Donna, and this is my story. If you enjoyed this story, you can support me by clicking Super Thanks. That way, I can write more stories like this. Thank you sincerely. And you, if you were in my place, what would you do? I would truly love to hear your thoughts. So please leave a comment below. And don't forget to tell me where you are listening from. If you want to hear more life stories like this one, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories waiting for you. A big hug, and see you next time. Donna's life shows us one thing. Sometimes, love is not just about unconditional sacrifice, but about daring to set boundaries. Because if we don't say enough, we may unintentionally nurture dependency and ingratitude. Family is indeed a place of love, but real love must come with respect. Perhaps this story also makes each of us wonder, in our own lives, have we ever sacrificed too much and forgotten our self-worth? And if you were in Donna's place, would you have the courage to say stop and reclaim your freedom? I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Leave a comment so we can share, learn, and grow together through these stories. And if you want to keep walking this journey with us, don't miss the next stories where every experience is a mirror reflecting our own lives.